Hey there, welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, Kamala Harris accepts the Democratic nomination at the DNC.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump slams Harris on the border.
And RFK Jr. partially suspends his campaign and endorses Trump. All right, well, we begin in Chicago, where Vice President Kamala Harris closed out the DNC last night, giving her acceptance speech for the Democratic nomination for president, only a month after President Biden bowed out of the race.
When I think about the path that we have traveled together, Joe, I am filled with gratitude. Your record is extraordinary, as history will show, and your character is inspiring. And Doug and I love you and Jill and are forever thankful to you both. I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
During her speech, Harris presented herself as a tough-on-crime prosecutor, highlighting her time as California Attorney General, while also casting Donald Trump as lawless in light of his various legal troubles and the events surrounding January 6th.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution.
Citing her background in law enforcement, Harris also said she's better suited to handle the border crisis than Trump, despite her record on illegal immigration, especially under the Biden-Harris administration with record illegal immigration, vowing to revive a failed Senate border deal.
After decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border. Last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. The Border Patrol endorsed it. But Donald Trump believes a border deal would hurt his campaign. So he ordered his allies in Congress to kill the deal. Well, I refuse to play politics with our security. And here is my pledge to you. As president, I will bring back the bipartisan border security bill that he killed, and I will sign it into law.
Now, Trump reacted to this with a rather good question. Why exactly hasn't she done anything about the border all along? FISM's Ian Patrick has more.
Former President Donald Trump had some harsh words for Kamala Harris after she wrapped up her time at the DNC. But perhaps his best critique came in the form of a very simple question while being interviewed by Fox News. Why hasn't she done anything yet?
Well, the biggest reaction is, why didn't she do the things that she's complaining about? All of these things that she talked about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do everything, but she didn't do any of it. She could have done it 3.5 years ago. She could do it tonight by leaving the auditorium and going to Washington, D.C. and closing the border. She doesn't need a bill. I didn't have a bill. I closed the border and created the safest border we've ever had in the history of our country. She could have done all of these things, and she could still do them. She's got 4.5, 5 months left. She can go there right now. She can do all of the things, many of the things that she's talking about and complaining about.
Trump also hit Harris more specifically on the border, saying that she's trying to shift the blame away from herself.
She doesn't need a bill. I didn't have a bill. I closed the border. I had the safest border in the history of our country. I closed it up. As president, now she'll have to get Joe to do it, but she could probably have a lot to do with that, right? She's the border czar. Now she wants to deny that, but she's the border. In any event, she was in charge of the border. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border so unsafe as this one.
Trump's comments on the border crisis reflect earlier statements he made during a visit to Arizona. During that speech, Trump lobbied multiple critiques against Harris and vowed to bring security to the entire situation.
So we went from the best numbers in recorded history to the worst numbers in recorded history or any other history. And we have a Marxist that's running, and I don't think you can let her. This country is not ready for a Marxist president. She will never build the wall. She doesn't want to build the wall. She's only saying if she changes her mind, it's only because she wants to get elected, because who wouldn't want to have a strong border? You need strong borders and strong elections, and we have neither. We had a border czar who was the border czar. She loved the title, but she didn't want to do the work because she's lazy, and probably more importantly than being lazy, she wants to have an open border.
But Trump had other things to say from Harris's DNC speech. When it comes to Project 2025, which she accused him of being a part of, he once again rebuffed the idea that the controversial political plan is tied to him in any way.
Well, she knows I have nothing to do with Project 25. They throw it out. A group of people got together. They did a thing. I haven't even seen it. I don't want to see it. I told them specifically, I don't want to see it. People know where I stand.
Trump also hit Harris on taxes and the economy, essentially saying that there won't be an America if she were to be elected. Trump also says that despite his aversion to debating on ABC, he would still do so if that's what needs to happen.
Well, number one debate on September 4th at Fox, and she turned it down. Because as you know, Brett, I was willing to debate with you and Martha. Well, I was going to debate on September 4th. She turned it down. And I'm willing to debate on, I don't like ABC. I think ABC is probably the worst of the group. But look, I am willing to debate, and I think we should do much more than one debate.
This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks for that, Ian. Well, Arizona can now enforce proof of citizenship during voter registration. The state measure was created in 2022 but was never put into practice. The Supreme Court partially granted the Republican National Committee's request to approve the legislation in a narrow 5-4 vote. Conservative Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch said they would have approved the law as a whole. However, the court is keeping separate provisions on hold that were challenged by the Biden administration. NBC News reports that more than 40,000 people have registered to vote in Arizona without proof of citizenship, although most of these people aren't active voters. Reportedly, only a small number of people will actually be affected by the court ruling.
Meanwhile, a shocking new report shows the number of American cities harboring illegal immigrants surged a stunning 40% under the Biden administration. That's according to new data coming from the Center for Immigration Studies. The report shows the addition of 170 new sanctuary cities and counties, many of them in states where sanctuary cities are actually banned. Virginia, North Dakota, Nebraska, New York, and Minnesota saw the most additions, bringing the total number of sanctuary jurisdictions in the country to nearly 600.
Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General says U.S. Customs and Border Protection wasn't prepared for risks involving their immigration app. The DHS watchdog reports that the CBP One app failed to assess and mitigate the technological risks involved with expanding the application process for immigrants coming across the southern border. The issues included the app's functionality, the program's lack of language translations, and frequent system errors. The app also lacked a vetting procedure for potentially suspicious trends in entry. Of course, this report comes amid the immigration crisis that has engulfed the nation under the Biden administration, and the Democratic Party's lack of effort in this area is a key weakness as they try to elect Kamala Harris as president. And coming up next, RFK Jr. ends his presidential campaign. The details after this.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today.
Hey there, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We begin this segment with a pretty major shakeup in the presidential race. That is, independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is officially suspending his campaign, at least in the battleground states, saying he didn't want his candidacy to cause the Democrats to win. Kennedy went on to endorse former President Donald Trump's campaign, and this endorsement could be a lifesaver for Trump, as Kennedy has been eating into narrow leads in several states. However, Kennedy's name will remain on the ballot in deep red and blue states. Trump says he appreciates the endorsement.
Meanwhile, in culture, Target CEO Brian Cornell fired back at Kamala Harris for saying that businesses hurt consumers with price gouging. The vice president doled out heavy criticism for retailers for raising their prices during the pandemic, which led to inflation. She said she would implement price control so it wouldn't happen again. Cornell responded to the accusation on CNBC by saying retailers are in a penny business.
Is there a more competitive space than retail? You know, no. Big multinationals,
or lower
margins,
or lower overall margins.
We're celebrating this morning the fact that we delivered, a margin rate of over 6%. You talk to other CEOs who are delivering op income of 20, 30, tech 40, companies. And 50%.
Yeah, tech
so we're in a penny business.
He also added that raising taxes on corporate businesses, as Harris suggested, would hurt companies. Cornell said that when corporate taxes were cut in 2017, Target spent almost $50 billion on building new stores nationwide and remodeling close to 1,000 existing stores.
And that's pretty surprising coming from the Target CEO, especially considering how left-wing they are on so many issues, especially the LGBT issues.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, they care about making money.
They do want to make money.
Of course.
That's right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, more economic news today. Home sales rose in July for the first time in 5 months. There was a marginal 1.3% month-over-month increase, according to data released yesterday by the National Association of Realtors. Around 3.95 million homes were sold in total, outpacing economists' expectations. However, the median home price was $422,600. That's up 4.2% from last year. It's the highest amount on record for July, and in all, the median home sales price has surged by 50% over the past 5 years as the U.S. continues to grapple with a housing affordability crisis. July saw an increase in the number of homes for sale, but that still was not enough to shift into a buyer's market.
At the same time, churches are also struggling with the effects of inflation. Robert Blair from Ministry Brands, a nonprofit dedicated to helping churches grow, says donations are down. According to the ministry's latest study, charitable giving did not keep up with inflation in 2023, with 55% of churches seeing a decline in tithing. The smallest churches were hit the hardest. Only 36% reported more income. In all churches, cash and check donations fell to 33%. Blair suggests more transparency on the pastor's side when talking about money and going digital with payments.
I have a 21-year-old son. He's never going to write a check, ever, right? My mom only writes checks. So as leaders in the church and as leaders of trying to grow healthy churches, We need to accommodate all congregants.
Pastor Solomon Adair from Life Church in Arlington, Texas, says going digital has been life-changing for his ministry, but not everything is about money. Adair added that putting a strong focus on evangelism has been a driving force behind giving. All right, and we have plenty more news coming up next. We'll be right back after a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In this segment, let's explore one of the most famous forerunners of the Protestant Reformation. Many church historians typically mark the beginning of the Protestant Reformation at the figure of Martin Luther, specifically in the year 1517 when he first aired his theological grievances against the Roman Catholic Church. But 100 years earlier, a man from Eastern Europe would enter the scene of church history and contend for the truth. Unlike Luther, who survived his condemnation, this man would ultimately burn at the stake for his faithfulness to Christian truth. Let's explore the famous forerunner to the Reformation, John Huss. Now remember, in late medieval Europe, the church looked very different than it does today. In medieval theology, the church did not allow common folk to read the Bible for themselves, and in fact, many priests could not even read the Bible. The Bible could only be read in Latin, and many people in medieval society could not understand or read Latin, which meant they did not know what the Bible said, even if they would have been allowed to read it, except for what the church told them it said. Now enter John Huss, born a peasant in the present-day region of the Czech Republic in Eastern Europe in 1369. His last name means goose in medieval Czech, which at first glance doesn't really seem much, but it will carry great significance as we study Huss's life, so stay tuned, that's going to come back later. Huss was greatly impacted as a young man by the teaching of the Englishman John Wycliffe, who had worked to translate the Bible to English earlier that century. In his early 30s, Huss became a priest at Bethlehem Chapel, which was one of the largest medieval churches of the time period. Huss was one of very few medieval priests who did study and understand the Bible, and through that he began to see the grave errors the church had committed against the teachings of Scripture, namely the prevention of allowing accessibility to the Bible for common folk and also the selling of indulgences. Now, indulgence sales were fast becoming commonplace in the church, and basically what happened is sinners could, for a price, purchase years off of time in purgatory or in hell for themselves or their loved ones. I hope you can see how this practice utterly distorts the gospel and the biblical teaching of justification by Christ alone. Huss certainly did. He was condemned as a heretic by the church, and in 1412, he was issued a death sentence. In 1414, Huss courageously went to the Council of Constance to give a defense for his beliefs. Now, as was the case for Luther 100 years later at Worms, Huss was promised safe passage, but safe passage was not given, and he was arrested. Huss would burn at the stake on June 6, 1415. And legend has it that as the flames engulfed him, he issued a prophecy. He said, "Today you are burning a goose." Remember, the meaning of Huss's name means goose. "But 100 years from now, you will hear a swan sing, and you will have to listen to him." And many church historians have discerned that Luther, the courageous reformer who contended for the same gospel truth as Huss, was the fulfillment of that prophecy 100 years later. Well, no matter the truth of the legendary prediction, one thing is certain: John Huss was a heroic example of Christian courage, trusting in the truth of God's word and the sufficiency of Christ alone for his salvation. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Do you want to invest in biblically responsible stocks? Financial Issues can help. For only $132 per year, our team of experts will help you make wise decisions with your money and guide you to successful investments that will not dishonor God. You'll also have access to our Portfolio Tracker tool, which will help you keep an eye on your asset allocations, and our Buys and Sells page, which will give you valuable information about biblically responsible stocks. Being a Financial Issues partner is the best way to invest in accordance with biblical values. Make the most of your money by becoming a partner today. Sign up at financialissues.org. That's financialissues.org.
When I took the test, I knew that I had other options. I was really scared. I know that it's really easy to get an abortion in New York. I've been down the other road before, and it really was a negative experience for me. And it felt like I did it because it made things easier for my partner at the time. And this time I thought, I think I want a different story. I'm just really scared. And she said, we'll take it a page at a time. It felt scary, but it felt like a good thing. I'm gonna have to, if I have this baby, I'm gonna have to do it alone, and that's gonna be really challenging. But I wanted to do it, but I knew that I needed help and to get around people that would help me, not people who would say, this is a problem that we can make go away. More like, this is awesome and we can help you make it more awesome.
And welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's continue our coverage and look now towards the Middle East, where on Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that his country's Air Force is prepared for any scenario. While inspecting the Ramat David Air Base in northern Israel, he had this to say.
The Air Force is our iron fist that knows how to hit the soft underbelly of our enemies. If we have to, we will prove it again and even more vigorously.
Netanyahu was accompanied by his chief of staff and military secretary during his visit to the airbase. The tour reportedly covered new offensive and defensive systems for the Israeli Air Force. The tour came after Netanyahu met with the families of hostages and fallen soldiers on Tuesday. While at the meeting, he told the families that his government is making an effort to return the hostages under the conditions that will allow a maximum number of captives to be released. Netanyahu further assured the families that the IDF is continuing to gain territory in Gaza and reiterated the goal of elimination of Hamas.
At the same time, still in issues in the Middle East, a French destroyer in the Red Sea rescued 29 oil tanker crewmen yesterday following a Houthi attack. The tanker was adrift at sea after the Houthis used an explosive drone boat. The tanker remains stuck in the Red Sea and is still carrying over 150,000 tons of crude oil, but all 29 members of the crew have returned safely to land. 25 Filipinos and Russians, in addition to 4 private security agents, were on board at the time. The incident comes as the Houthi rebels continue to attack international shipping in the Red Sea, saying they will only stop once the war in Gaza comes to an end.
And the Biden administration is sending another $125 million in military aid to Ukraine. The new package reportedly includes more missiles, artillery ammo, counter-drone systems that will be taken from Pentagon stockpiles. It comes as Ukraine continues a cross-border incursion on Russia's sovereign territory. When asked if the Pentagon supports the operation, Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said they are still getting a better understanding of what's happening in Kursk.
So we're supporting Ukraine and what they need on the battlefield right now. As you heard us say time and again, we are getting a better understanding of what the Ukrainians are doing in Kursk. Our policy does allow for them to engage in those counterfires, but we are still supporting Ukraine in what they need on the battlefield, and that is through different presidential drawdown packages. That's not going to change.
Ukraine has stated that its goal is to create a buffer zone at the border.
And turning our attention now to China for a moment, where Beijing says it's gravely concerned about a possible U.S. nuclear strategy shift. Those comments follow a New York Times report saying the Biden-Harris administration made countering Beijing a top nuclear strategy earlier this year. Beijing's foreign ministry has since responded, saying that the U.S. is shirking an obligation to nuclear disarmament, saying the U.S. is now the world's biggest nuclear threat. This comes as China has been heavily investing in its own nuclear capabilities, as the Pentagon believes they will have 1,000 nuclear weapons in their arsenal by the year 2030.
Meanwhile, earlier this week, Venezuela's highest court upheld the results of the country's July presidential election. The decision from the Supreme Tribunal of Justice came after the court said it reviewed all available material from the country's election authority. The court ultimately upheld the decision, which claimed that incumbent President Nicolas Maduro won just over 50% of the votes. Head of the court, Carlisa Rodriguez, announced that the ruling cannot be appealed. The UN Human Rights Council has since claimed that the Supreme Tribunal of Justice is not an impartial judge in the case, saying in a statement that the government of Venezuela exerted undue influence over TSJ decisions. An investigation by the Human Rights Council found that Rodriguez was previously a member of Maduro's ruling party and held elected office within the party.
And to wrap up our show today, the UK continues its crackdown on free speech as this week Home Secretary Yvette Cooper announced new plans to treat misogyny as a form of extremism as part of her efforts to go after people, quote, pushing harmful and hateful beliefs. According to the BBC, Secretary Cooper has ordered a review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy to determine how to best tackle threats posed by these harmful ideologies. It also includes a review of Islamist and extreme far-right views as well. All this comes as the UK has been looking to crack down on controversial online speech amid anti-immigrant riots sweeping the country. And they really have been going after people. People are in jail,
Right.
and even the Scotland Yard says they might even try to go after Elon Musk. I'm really not sure how they do that, but they're gonna
Right,
try.
yeah, that's quite scary. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And over the weekend, you can follow us on social media at FISM News. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on Monday with more news coverage.
When it comes to money, I always have so many questions. I never know where to go to get answers to those questions. They never really teach you this stuff in school, like some of the best ways to handle it, how to save, when to invest, where to invest, even just what to do with the money. And if I put it in the stock market, what's the best way to protect from losing it all? That fear can be paralyzing. You don't really know what decisions to make. As a Christian, I don't want to give my money to people who are going to use it for things that God hates. When I discovered financial issues, it was like a burden was lifted off my shoulders. Not only did I gain access to a simple investment strategy that I can manage myself, I also have the peace of mind that my money will not be going to companies that actively promote things that God hates. Financial issues has allowed me to experience peace in my investments.
Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
My name is Valtasia. I have 5 kids total. I was basically a single mom. I didn't have an address to my name. And here it comes, that not just one baby I'm finna have, it was 3. I honestly was not gonna keep them. I had it in my mind deep down inside that I couldn't do it. I came straight abortion minded. What changed my mind was I talked to the counselor and, very encouraging. They'll also tell me, you're not going to be alone. If you need anything, reach out to us or anything. I was amazed. I definitely have a challenge of having my babies. A lot of people will ask me, how do you do that? How do you maintain? Only thing I can say is prayer. Prayer really, really worked.
To donate, just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby, or go to financialissues.org and click on the preborn banner.